Hi everybody, welcome back to Thailand Band once again. If it's your first time here, my name is Peter and I talk about all things Thailand. Today I'm going to be reading out 4 viewers' stories. They're very good stories today, guys. 2 of them are quite long, 2 of them are quite short. One goes all the way back to 1971 and I'm sure you're going to enjoy these immensely. So I'm not going to waste any time. Let's kick straight off and get into the first story.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I began my story after splitting up with my girlfriend in the UK and not really doing anything exciting for the next 3 years. And then one afternoon in May 2017, I decided to go back to Thailand. I'd been with an old girlfriend in 2003 and I always wanted to go back. I'd only been in Bangkok and Koh Samui, but I'd heard so much about Pattaya. I just had to go there. I booked my holiday online and spent the next 5 months thinking of my upcoming trip with excitement. I spent hours looking online at videos about Pattaya, and the more I watched, the more excited I became. I knew exactly where I was going to go when I got there, even though I'd never been there before. Well, the 5 months dragged on, but eventually I was on the way to the airport and I just couldn't wait to get to Thailand. By the way, I was 46 back then in 2017, so there I was, sitting at the departure lounge, and eventually after a long flight, I arrived in Bangkok. I knew I was just hours from my first night out alone. I got on the coach from Bangkok to Pattaya and suddenly I became a bit nervous as the coach was just full of groups of guys and I was alone. I really needed to just get out in Pattaya and have a couple of cold beers to relax me. Finally, I arrived in the outskirts of Pattaya and was transferred into a much smaller bus. I knew I was very close to now starting my Thailand adventure. And as the small bus travelled through the streets to get me to my hotel on Soi 10 or 11, I was getting more and more excited the nearer to the beach the bus got. There were lots and lots of beautiful Thai ladies walking around everywhere. I knew I'd taken the right decision to come to Pattaya. I arrived at my hotel, which was called the Sawadee Sunshine, and soon I was in my room. Aircon on, bags opened, shower on, change of clothes. I couldn't wait to get out there. As I left my room with a grin on my face, I was greeted with the cries of, "You want massage, handsome man?" 2 minutes later and I arrived at a big bar complex with about 15 bars. All the girls looked great and were shouting at me to come in their particular bar. It was the bar at the back where the girls seemed to be the loudest than the others, so I went to that bar. There were around 6 or 9 pretty ladies in the bar, of which 4 came and stood right in front of me. After asking me what I wanted to drink, the 4 girls were all bidding for my attention and trying to speak with me all at the same time. One girl in particular stood out as very pretty. She was wearing a very short black dress. I had several drinks with this girl and she seemed really nice. As I remember, she was younger than me, being 35, although that's what she told me. Although she was real cute, I decided at this point that I had only just arrived in town. I was not going to hook up with her, the first girl I'd met anyway. The night was still young. After downing my beer, I told her that she was lovely and I said I would be back later. I then proceeded to walk down the short road to the beach. The sights and smells of Pattaya were captivating me and I was truly loving life. I grabbed a quick bit of barbecue food from a street vendor. Everybody looked happy and the atmosphere seemed to be great. Then I was on Beach Road. I walked over so I could get a better view of the ladies on their phones next to the beach. As I walked down the beach road heading towards Walking Street, I remember my smile just getting bigger and bigger as all the ladies smiled at me and some said that famous bar girl phrase that you'll always hear in Pattaya, "I go with you." I was now approaching a bar just before Walking Street on the left called Bamboo Bar. I went in and had a beer. I felt I was now probably getting into the swing of things. As I sat in the Bamboo Bar, the music was playing and I noticed about 5 or 6 girls kept smiling at me every time I looked their way. I knew I was going to have a good night even though I was alone in Pattaya. After about 20 minutes and a beer, or 3 later, one lady came over and introduced herself. She was about 40 but very attractive for her age. Again I had a drink but then moved on to explore what the night had to offer. Off I went on my merry way as the night was really moving on now. I decided to have a few drinks in a go-go bar and bought a girl a drink. This particular lady came across and jumped on my lap. By this time I was now drinking doubles of Thai whiskies and Coke. I was told that girls who work in go-go bars are very expensive to spend time with, so once again I left on my own. As I left the go-go bar, I looked at my watch. It was now around midnight. I was feeling quite drunk now. I decided at this point I was on the verge of making a bad decision, drunk decision, so I spent an amazing 80 minutes having my feet massaged in a place on Beach Road. As I left the shop, I gave the lady who had given me the massage a 200 baht tip. She thanked me with a big smile that went from ear to ear. I was still very drunk, but there was an idea formulating in my head. I went back to the first bar, hoping that the pretty girl I had had drinks with was still there. Luckily for me, she was. We had several more drinks together, and as I asked her if she'd let me pay the bar for her, she agreed, and we walked hand in hand up the beach road, me a slightly overweight 47-year-old guy from the UK and a drop-dead gorgeous Thai girl. I felt great. I think you can guess the rest. It was truly incredible. First night in Pattaya and the first night I've ever spent alone in Thailand. I've been back 4 or 5 times since. Needless to say, I absolutely love Thailand and can't wait to get back. I really love your channel, Peter, and now I'm going to hear you tell my story. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope I did it justice. Okay, let's move it right along into our second story. This is a very, very nice story. It's quite long. It starts off in Vancouver, it moves over to Singapore, and then finally ends up in Pattaya. Stick with it, guys. Great story. Let me jump straight into it for you. I like your channel and I subscribed last summer. Thinking of new video subjects is challenging, so I propose people could send in stories revolving around first day night experiences in Thailand. Having never travelled in Asia, I was certainly in shock from the moment we landed. The year was 1998. So the story goes like this. I was working for a high-tech chemical company in Vancouver. My boss and his best friend decided to take advantage of an offer to attend a Canadian-Singapore trade mission. Since we were actively exporting services and software in addition to regular jobs, part of our costs were subsidised, and the 2 other guys were very excited about the trip. I was given the opportunity to attend as long as I gave a speech in Singapore, with the idea of picking up some companies in Singapore to distribute our novel software to. In addition to the meetings, the Prime Minister of Canada was flying in to do a ribbon cutting ceremony at the newly constructed Canada House. In Singapore, this would allow Canadians to travel to Singapore and use office space complete with a secretary who would answer the phone with your company name. This may help lots of smaller companies wanting to export or import from Singapore. We flew from Vancouver to Singapore with a quick stop in Seoul, Korea, and I was told stories of both Singapore and Thailand by the friend of my boss who I knew well. His name is Mark. Mark had been to Singapore several times and to Bangkok and Pattaya 33 times thus far. He travels for work and stops into Thailand before returning home. On the plane, I was taught the do's and don'ts of Thailand and heard story after story as I sipped my tiger beer. Flying Singapore Airlines was amazing. We arrived in Singapore at 10:30 in the evening, got into our rooms, and immediately Mark wanted to go to Little India for some food. That's an area of Singapore. Close to midnight, we took a taxi to the Little India sector of Singapore, but the restaurants he wanted to go to were closed. Went through a small red light area with some seedy alleys and saw a few girls hanging around. Unsuccessful at finding a good place to eat, we returned to the hotel and had a good night's sleep. We had 3 days before our meeting, so we played tourists, went to the Sentosa Island Aquarium, Raffles Hotel, and a good look around Little India, complete with a good curry from the restaurant. We attended our meetings, gave our speeches, and to my surprise, we were graded on the quality of our speeches and were informed of how we placed. My speech ranked high. I just talked loudly and slow to the 80 or so people that were there. Lunch was included, and I found myself sitting beside the Canadian Foreign Trade Minister, the Canadian Minister of Agriculture, a couple of other ministers. My boss, let's call him Walter, was also at the table. Lunch consisted of many small plates, and the dishes just kept coming. Fantastic lunch, and the Canadian ministers talked a lot about where the best bars were, etc. So it was a lot of fun. After the meetings were over, we went back to our hotel, changed, and later went for supper. We ended up at a club with good live music, lots of girls and lots of Aussies and Brits. which I enjoyed talking to. The girls were together with friends or escorted, so I did not talk to them very much. We had a good time, but retired before midnight. The next day, we had an invitation to attend the opening of Canada House. We were bused to the event from our hotel. Next up was the Prime Minister of Canada, and he gave a very good speech of what he hoped Canada House would do for Canada and Singapore relations. I was standing quite close during his speech, and I was probably on TV that night. The Prime Minister was then guided to an escalator to view the offices inside the building. I followed and joined the procession right behind the Prime Minister. As I neared the top of the escalator, I turned around to see Mark and Walter still back where I was standing. They wondered what the hell I was doing. I was under the impression that I was supposed to follow. Inside the building, I followed the Prime Minister down a long hallway, and reaching the end, the Prime Minister abruptly turned around and we collided. He was taller than me, and he looked down at me and saw my Singapore-Canada pin on the lapel of my suit. He did not speak, but looked at me and gave me a nod of his head. I did not know what to say, so I returned the nod. We then left Canada House, and I imagined the communications going on amongst all the security people, since no one knew who I was. Back outside, we got the bus and went to the lunch of roughly 600 people. I ended up sitting beside the former Canadian ambassador to Singapore and a beautiful lady from Singapore, head of the Singapore Research Council, and a couple of other guys from Canada who I did not know, but they mentioned they liked my speech on the previous day. The former ambassador ordered up several bottles of a very good wine, and it started to flow. Mark and Walter were placed at a different table to me, but no one from the table ordered wine. The wine was hugely expensive. We had previously checked out of the hotel and had our luggage with us. At 1:30 or so, we grabbed a cab and made it to the airport. 3 hours later, we had landed in Bangkok and made it through customs without delays. I had no idea where we were going or what was about to happen, but we had a scheduled 10 days in Thailand, and for me, it was all expenses paid except for personal spending. The taxi took about an hour and we were delivered to the Nanaplaza Hotel. I think this is a Nana Hotel opposite Nana Plaza. Maybe it was called the Nana Plaza Hotel back then. We got our rooms and a young man carried my suitcase to the room, even though I did not want him to. And upon arrival, he asked me if I would like a girl. My mind said, huh? What? But my lips said no. Back in 1998, there was not the mass of girls outside the hotel as you see today, but Nana Plaza across the street was up and running. We decided to go there before having a meal, and I followed along. We went up a floor, and the first go-go bar was called American Strip. Two girls outside were aggressively pushing Mark and Walter inside. I hung back and watched them. Then I proceeded in last. One of the girls ran her finger quite hard up my back on the outside of my shirt. This shocked me, and I jumped forward a few feet, and then I turned around, shook my index finger at the girl and told her she was naughty. The two girls laughed at me for a few seconds. Once inside, we sat at the bar, and there were only a couple of other tourists in the place. Immediately we sat down, received a beer, and I looked around. There were 4 or 5 dancing in front of us, and a larger plump lady started to massage my neck. She was quite strong, and I enjoyed it for a short duration. A very beautiful girl wearing shorts made from old jeans sat beside me and started to chat me up. Her English was perfect. The more we talked, the more I was enjoying myself. I bought ladies' drinks for her and for the girl who was massaging my neck. I had been told what a lady drink was on the flight over. We had 2 beers at that place over a 45-minute period, and then my buddies said, "We're going." My brain said, no, but I had to follow my buddies. We left American Strip and went into the next bar along. We had 1 beer at that place, which was similar to the American Strip, but the girls were not as pretty and less talkative to us. We then went to the 3rd bar, and again the girls were a little pushy. We went in, and I noticed that the floor was a sort of S-shaped with several large couches along each wall, each separated by a small stage. On each stage were 3 or 4 girls dancing. On each couch was a guy sitting with a multiple of girls around him. My buddies were found a table right at the door, but I decided to walk all the way to the back of the room and use the washroom. Upon leaving the washroom, I saw one of the girls in a long evening dress, and she was different. She stood from her leaning position and she was taller than me, much taller. Then in a deep voice, she said, "Would you like to buy me a lady's drink?" Okay. Was she a lady boy? She was a lady boy. I replied no. I rapidly made my way to our table and explained to my friends that I had just been approached by a lady boy. Mark said, "Okay, how many lady boys do you think are in here?" I did a quick total, scrutinised the girls a little more. In the meantime, a beautiful girl came up beside me and leaned against me. She was the most beautiful girl I'd seen thus far, and she could easily be a model. My friends were grinning at me from the other side of the table. While she was leaning on me, I answered my friends, "Okay, there are 22 girls in here. I think 7 of them are possibly ladyboys." Mark leaned over, laughed and said they were all ladyboys in this place. I was in shock. The beautiful girl leaning against me was so pretty. Mark bought her a lady's drink and I asked her up front if she was a guy. Her voice changed and she said, "Yes." And she stopped leaning on me and I took my arm from her. I said, "Well, at least you're pretty." She said, "Why, thank you," in the creepiest voice I have ever heard. Now, I was a little mad and wanted to return to the American strip where I'd had so much fun. My buddies said no, and they mentioned that we will be going to multiple bars. Some may have ladyboys, and we won't be going back to any bars we've already visited. They explained a little more in depth as to how to tell if the person I was speaking to was a ladyboy or a real girl. We departed that club and left in a taxi to a high-class Thai restaurant with amazing food and a show of Thai people dancing to Thai music on unusual instruments, beautiful costumes and a wonderful meal. We then took a taxi back to Nanaplaza and ended up in a bar on the ground floor, I think, with an array of counters with girls dancing on counters and full of people. We got beers and watched what was happening. It seemed to be a lot of chaos going on. I was sitting next to the cash register and the girls kept pinching me and bothering me on purpose. 2 of the girls grabbed Walter, pulled him off his stool, then laughed and walked away. Walter said, "What the heck was that all about?" We had a good laugh about it anyway. The girls were relentless, but it was fun interacting with them. I noticed that a tourist had likely lost his glasses and was wearing swim goggles, presumably prescription. He took off his shirt, wearing only a pair of shorts, jumped up on the bar with the ladies and started dancing with them. He lasted about 2 minutes as he was drunk before he fell off, which was hugely funny because the girls all swarmed him, then helped him up. Some of the girls were not happy that he was on the counter, but you could see them shrug it off. 2 minutes later, some guy comes over to me and starts complaining and whining about the dude on the bar. I told him I had nothing to do with it and told him to relax. He thought I was the owner of or manager since the girls were continually chatting with me and I was sat near the cash register. He then apologised and promptly left the bar. I had a good time at this bar, but it was very busy, and after a couple of beers, my buddies were yet again heading out. We got into a taxi and drove a short while to a large facility with a live band and lots of young guys from all over the world and girls everywhere, all dressed up very nicely. Must have been some sort of freelancer place. We got beers and sat for a while. Mark and Walter left the table in search of the perfect girl. I didn't know what to do exactly, so I went to the main bar and grabbed another beer for myself. Waiting for my beer, a young Thai girl asked where I was from. She was nice looking and I would guess that she is going to college because she spoke perfect English. Some Aussie joined us and a couple of guys from England, and we all started to chat. We had some great conversations. Then the girl told me she had to go back because she had to work the next day. She said she could not come back to my room. I hadn't asked her anyway. She took my hand and we went over to a table and she introduced me to her friend. Her name was Noi and she reminded me of an office worker dressed smartly, short black hair, perfect skin and teeth. She was very, very beautiful. We chatted for a few minutes and I told her I should really return to my table since I had not seen my friends for a while. She said she would come along. I didn't ask her. When we got back to our table, Mark and Walter had girls of their own. Mark said that I hit the jackpot with Noise since he liked her appearance. After about 30 minutes or so, we all crammed into a cab and went back to the Nana Plaza Hotel and to our rooms. Noi and I were tired and we fooled around a little bit, but did not finish anything. We didn't finish anything, preferring to just sleep for a while. In the morning, 8:30 or so, I wake up with her initiating an aerobic session with me. That got my attention. She quickly proceeded to get her morning exercise. Just about this time, the bloody phone rings and my friends are having breakfast and want me to come downstairs. I showered and said my goodbyes to Noi. She was a little grumpy as she had wanted to tag along with me that day. I joined my friends at the breakfast table and I was still shaking a little bit from the morning's aerobics. We then went to the Empress Palace, a boat ride through the canals back to the Oriental Hotel and another fantastic supper meal. That night I took it easy with some quiet drinks in the hotel bar. The next day was an early trip to Pattaya where we stayed at the Palm Garden Hotel at the Dolphin Roundabout. Great food, only about $20 a night. We settled in for another 9 days of fun and craziness, but I will save all that for the next time as this story is also a little long. Wasn't that a great story, guys? Now, I've actually written to this guy and said, look, do you have the rest of the story from when you arrived in Pattaya? And I'm hoping he'll put that together and we'll get another, version too. Okay guys, we're going to finish up with two quite short stories. I like this next story because it's a little bit of an eye-opener. It goes all the way back to 1971 and there's a few things here I didn't know about, but as I say, it is quite short but definitely worth reading it out. I was stationed at Ubon AB in 1971. I was 19. Around the base there were plenty of beer bars. If I remember correctly, it was 50 cents for a beer. You could bring your own bottle of spirits in and just pay for the mixers. A very cheap night out indeed. The scene 50 years ago was much different than today, as you can imagine. I'm retired here now, by the way. Some of the major differences may surprise your viewers. Firstly, there was no such thing as a bar fine. All of the ladies that were in the clubs were freelancers. Secondly, there were no ladies' drinks. If your friend wanted to drink, you either bought her a beer or she shared your bottle. As there were no hotels at the time around the base, if you wanted company for the night, you would go back to her house. Sometimes she lived alone, sometimes with a friend. There were no negotiations on the price. It was a flat 100 baht, which back then was about $5 US. Same for a soapy massage, except there were no extra fees for anything. Hard to imagine, I know. Airmen my age were not making a lot of money. Anyway, a lovely girl named Pen and I would get together from time to time. The night before I was to fly back to the States, she asked if she could borrow $20. She said she would meet me at the airport the next day to return the money. I gave it to her and looked forward to seeing her the next day to see me off. To the surprise of no one living at the time, she never showed up. I just let it go, a lesson learned. When I arrived in the USA, I took some R&R time and went to the beaches of sunny Florida. My favourite aunt took me to the horse races. I didn't know anything about these four-legged beauties or how to place a bet. My aunt told me to just pick a number or two, sit back and keep your fingers crossed. When I approached the betting window, it suddenly hit me. Penn's number at the bar was 54. I put $20 down on number 5 and number 4. Crazy as it sounds, my horses finished in that order and I was elated to have won £250. So thank you, Penn. Karma is good. I will add that the bar girls then were a different breed than they are today. No cell phones, no internet to distract them. Most were looking for husbands or at least long-term boyfriends of minimum 1 year. One of my friends married such a lady and they are still together today. That's quite a nice story, isn't it? Way old story. 71, what's that, 1890? Yeah, about 50 years ago. Unbelievable. Okay guys, I'll jump straight into the last story. This is a short one, little bit of a lesson to be learnt here. Quite a nice little story. So here we go. After enjoying a Pattaya holiday a year previously, I decided to indulge in another one. When booking the ticket on a website called Expedia, I decided to change my departure time because my current time would mean being stuck in the Middle East for 9 hours. I went for a Friday night at 1:10 a.m. flight. I know what you're thinking, guys. How stupid is that? Anyway, made it to Pattaya okay, enjoyed a brilliant holiday, and 2 weeks later on the Friday evening, I get a taxi to the airport. I arrived at the check-in desk, presented my ticket, and was told that my flight was booked yesterday morning. My face dropped and I felt not only sick inside but scared as well. I asked if I could be put on another flight using the same ticket, but was told that as my ticket was a cheap last-minute deal, the airline could not accommodate a change of flight date. This was just their policies, but they could put me on another flight if I purchased another ticket from my own funds. As this was now the end of my holiday, I had just about spent all the money I had spent all the money except for a few hundred baht. To make matters worse, I didn't own a credit card at the time and had no debit card with me, so could not even take cash out of an ATM machine. How bad can it get? I phoned my parents back home and asked them to buy me a ticket, but when they looked online, prices were now over £1,000 for economy. My mother was over 60 at the time, so did not really know what she was doing on the internet. So I purchased a SIM card at the airport, which gave me access to the internet on my mobile phone, and found a flight leaving for the UK at 8:20 the following morning. I gave the details to my mother. She booked the flight for me. The next few hours were a blur of people coming and going. I felt like Tom Hanks in the movie The Terminal. As soon as I received the confirmation email that my ticket had been booked and I knew I was on a flight, I felt a bit more relaxed. So it is now time to get on this new flight. I queued and again got to the front desk, only to be told to go to the airline office. I was not sure why. Luckily for me, since I now had a valid ticket which they wanted to check, they seemed a lot more interested to get me on this flight. The McDonald's I had in the departure lounge felt like the best meal I'd ever had in my life, bought with the last 500 baht I had to my name. I had spent a total of 26 hours in the airport. I had no one else to blame but myself. So guys, the party in Thailand is always great, but make sure you don't miss that all-important flight home like I did. Believe me, you will be in a world of pain like I was. Richard. I think he'd missed it because it was just 1:10 in the morning. He'd got confused, and you know what it's like when you're on holiday in Thailand. I myself have never missed a flight, and I hope I never will. All right, tomorrow's stream with Simon has been cancelled, unfortunately, on the other channel. Simon's been called away on business quite unexpectedly. He's going to be away for the weekend, so he won't be able to get back for the stream. But I will be here tonight on this channel, 9 p.m. UK time, to do a live stream by myself. This will be my third one. I've done two others. It was a lot of fun last week, and we had a couple of hundred people in the chat. I hope you guys can join in for the chat tonight. You can talk about whatever you want, and we can just throw some ideas about. Okay, so that's it for this week once again. I'll see you tonight, 9 p.m. UK time, and I'll be back next Saturday with some more stories.